Hi, everybody. Hi, my name is Jonathan McCrory. I am the Executive Artistic Director of the National Black Theater, and I am privileged to be with two dynamic members of our community, Dr. David Johns and the incomparable Emil. Today, actually, during the daytime, we're going to have a conversation that's really centering around community. This is gearing towards a very special event that's happening in the Washington, D.C. area called The Gathering, a collective sonic ring shout. And today we're going to talk about community. We're going to give our space and time to really dive into what community means and what does it mean to center this word that lives in our psyche called the gathering, and how we as three dynamic, and I live in the light of these two individuals, why the work that they do, the work that we collectively do is important for now and actually for setting a future to show up in our present moment. So without further ado, I'm gonna give the floor so these humans can these humans can introduce themselves. So Dr. John, do you want to go first?
Sure. Happy to jump in the double dutch ropes. And I'll keep it brief, but just acknowledge what an honor it is to be here, to have this conversation with you, to be in community and to live through what it is that we've been invited to talk about. For folks who don't know, NBJC is the nation's oldest civil rights organization, intentionally and unapologetically clear that none of us get free unless and until all of us get free. And before the words lesbian, gay, transgender, same gender loving existed, we showed up in beautifully diverse ways. So it is always an honor to show up in community with the goal of getting more of us closer to freedom.
I mean, that pause, clap, and thanks. And Emil, do you want to guide us into a little bit about who you are and letting people know what you're bringing to the table?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm so grateful to be in community with both of you, and just to be uplifted in spirit. So it's always a pleasure. I'm Emil Wilbekin. I'm the founder of Native Son. Native Son is inspiration, empowerment for Black, gay, and queer men. We say that we are a movement, community, and platform. We were started 8 years ago as an intervention for myself, and turned out that a whole community of Black, gay, and queer men globally needed that same intervention. And so it's really about amplifying and lifting up our voice and visibility in the world, how we're represented, and coming from behind the shadows and really owning our power, our voice, and our story. So happy to be here with you both, truly.
I mean, what's actually quite beautiful, and I'm gonna go a little bit more into that owning of story and power, Emil, is the fact that when we think about the idea of gathering and the different ways in which we gather, when I did my research around that term and inside the Black community, how it was literally an antidote to slavery, to chattel slavery. That the idea of gathering amongst Black people gave an intentional space that allowed for us to find our reunion, to find our family, our people, our tribe that was dispersed. And so when we think about family reunions, when we think about the cookout, when we think about these colloquials, even a ball scene, right? All these spaces where Black folks gather and they find their people, it is truly a mechanism of healing. And I'm just wondering how Native Son has been that, and what way that journey has come to the horizon, and where do you see the gathering or the ideas of gathering showing up as necessary for us today?
Well, I think, Native Son was built about gathering Black, gay, and queer men, because I felt like we live at the intersection of our Blackness and our queerness, and we don't have a lot of spaces in the light where we can actually be reflections of each other. And so that was kind of the initial idea. And just in the very beginning, I did a listening tour with brothers that I knew, didn't know, to find out their stories, right? And what are the similarities and what are the differences? Are you out? Are you HIV positive? Are you single? Are you married? Do you want to have kids? Are you the only one in your workspace? And it was all these different things. And there just seemed to be this need for us to gather together, to see each other, be reflections of each other, and then find healing, right, within that reflection. So it's been interesting for us to talk about, half of our community living with HIV and AIDS. It's interesting to talk about how many of our communities still don't have the privilege to live their full, authentic lives because of structures, right? Systems, racisms, politics, right? Office politics, all these different things, or safety, right? It's not safe for people to be out as who they are. And so we look at all of those different things and then creating a community of like-mindedness, right? So that we can see each other. What is normalizing what Black, gay, and queer love looks like? What does celebrating someone's success, receiving their doctorate, like, what does that look like, right? That we honor that we celebrate that we lift that up. And so that's what Native Son does. And it's really using art and kind of community as a form of activism, right? The repetitiveness of seeing these, we posted graduation posts recently, and to see all these Black queer men with their hoods and their gowns and their, regalia, that's inspiring to future generations.
Ashe. Ashe. Yes. And Dr. John, as we use the word doctor for your own regalia and your own tassel, do you mind just addressing that as well? Like how the intentionality of gathering works inside of your work, and thinking about that term liberation and how that term liberation is something we all should own and have access to.
Absolutely. Beautiful question. And Emil laid the perfect platform. And so I wrote down a couple of things to guide my intervention. One is Matthew 18:20, right? So many of us know where 2 or 3 are gathered, right? Jesus has committed that he will show up, not only to acknowledge that each of us are beautifully and wonderfully made exactly as we are supposed to be, often in spite of what the world might tell us, and that he will work to get us free in every sense of the word, right? And so what I know is that as social beings, we are required to gather. It is one of the things that makes us unique, our ability to exist in ways that don't reflect primates or other species that don't have the ability to gather, to commune, to converse in ways that allow people to build, to create, to innovate, and to thrive is what makes us special. And what we know as Native Sons, as people who have skin that's been kissed by the sun, as beautifully diverse descendants of Africa, as the creators of everything, is that white supremacy and white racial actors work to prevent us from, one, knowing that we are beautiful and perfect, and God doesn't make any mistakes in whatever form you want to acknowledge that higher being, and that when we are able to show up in our fullness first, and then exist in loving community, we are able to do powerful things, including naming the vestiges of transatlantic and transincludic and transpacific enslavement. It allows us to talk about what Black feminists name as the matrices of domination, the signs, systems, and symbols that allow white supremacy to be omnipresent yet hyper invisible. I'm spending a little bit of time here because everything that Emil talked about in seeking personal self-intervention first, and then the affirmation that a pathway to healing requires us to work together, are things that we know natively, intuitively, right? In the same way that when we tried to get free, white folks created a term, dryptomania, to convince us that we were crazy. Some of this stuff is sacral. And so when I think about the work of NBJC and how it's connected to all of this, is we are the inheritors of folks who have done this, understanding the importance of this legacy work and what other people might call the work of race warriors. Over my shoulder is Brother Byron Rustin, who too many people still don't know about, right? It makes me frustrated. You can hear it in my voice now that we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King, and we should, but that's his mentee. Dr. King delivered a seminal speech on the stage that this man built, right? And so I'm really excited and honored that we get to continue in his legacy in this June Support and Equity Week, a whole week of events and activities that not only acknowledge the importance of looking back, but celebrating the work and the opportunity we have to do together to move forward. And so as I land this plane, we're excited to invite folks to join us for a series of advocacy events at the White House, on Capitol Hill, all throughout DC on June 13th. Or 12th, on June 13th, we have a Rights and History Expo at Howard University where you can register to vote, get free HIV testing, learn about the history of Black ballroom and how queer and Black it is. You can take dance classes, including from Anthony Burrell, one of our brothers. On that Friday, join us at Howard Theater for the first ever Equity Ball, where our community will do among the things that only our community can do until we give them windows into it in the way that Beyonce and others are. Shout out to Lego and Jack Mizrahi. And then we're having an equity march on the 15th, which begins where a lot of our civil rights siblings end their work at the foot of the Lincoln Monument, but then moves toward Black Lives Matter Plaza, where we will have a show that talks about the power of equity, of us reminding the Biden administration that we're outside and we're responsible for you occupying that house that is the people's house. It's a house that we built for free. And we are owed things as citizens of this country so that we can all get closer to the liberation that you talked about.
I mean, what actually is so beautiful and so apropos about what you just uplifted is this notion of how DC is a very critical place inside of articulating, owning, and naming Black folks' liberation in this country. And what ways do we activate it? From the simple fact of you uplifting Mr. Rustin in a way in which that I think creates a beautiful landmark of the shoulders in which many of us, almost all of us, stand on, who seek ourselves as liberated humans in melanated skin, but also people who fight for justice. They fight under or work in the service of justice, work in the stewardship and knowledge of that human you just uplifted, who created a blueprint that transformed this city, transformed our country, to understand gathering as a radical act that could draw everyone together. And we think about what that March on Washington was, and also thinking about, in connection to the work that you're doing in June, thinking about the work that NBT, National Black Theater, and the Apollo and the Kennedy Center will be doing leading into June. It's almost like there's a baton that's being passed around liberation, around the consciousness of what does it mean to gather, and around this notion of if we do not work consecutively together, if we do not start to figure out how the pieces of the puzzle of all of our movements work towards a human shift, we actually are not taking the mantle properly from our forebears. We actually are not allowing for that wisdom of that beautiful human behind you, Mr. Rustin, to actually be lived as a torch-bearing to the future, which is also equally deeply exciting. To think about how June will, in this city of Washington, D.C., where I'm at right now, will be radically changed, not only in its performance venues, but in its streets, not only in its monuments, but in its policy. Like what ways, not even in its also in its universities, right? We think about Howard University as this pinnacle mecca of Black culture and Black educational culture, it holding space for a ball, it holding space for that queer culture. That's important. So that the Mecca is also a Mecca, not just for this harmonious heteronormative notion of what does it mean to be Black, but it's a Mecca that says you're the queer of who we are, which is human. It's not a sexuality or not X, Y, and Z. I think it's a little bit deeper than that. We hold space for it all. So I just wanted to. You got me excited when you started talking about and the distinct work of what you're going to be doing in DC, because it felt like, June is actually a powerful moment in the DMV area, because June will be a moment where we will sit with our humanness, and the narrative of who we are will be changed. The narrative of who we are can be changed, because it has to be. If we think about the critical moment that we're in this society, there is a request on behalf of our ancestors to complete the unfinished work, and a request to name that work in our action, not just in our words.
Yeah, and I think that what's very interesting about June, right, is that, yes, we celebrate Pride, and that's wrought with some challenges for many of us, because it's about, are we being included, right, in that? And I think what has happened is this uplifting of Juneteenth, right, not forgetting that it's also Black Music Month, and kind of owning all of that. I think we've been in this really great space now of owning June for ourselves, right? The great march that Dr. Johns is leading. You know, the Native Son Awards are on the 12th. Your events start on the 12th. You're doing all this amazing sonic circle work and gathering leading into that. It's powerful, right? Because we are really shifting change and energy by waking people up and bringing them together, and we don't have to suffer by ourselves.
I love it. I mean, it's so, I mean, no, it's just like, what more does, it's just like a pause, like allowing silence to be a part of the equation of grace, because like what you just, the way that all of our, again, what I said at the beginning, the way in which our three organizations are working in the concert in the cosmology of liberation, looking at the power of June as a nexus for that, is profound. From the way that we're going to witness each other and celebrate each other with the awards of Native Son, to the way in which that we are going to bring to the forefront the queer and trans and non-binary Black folks' rights with the work that you're doing, Dr. John, to the sonic work when we think about how the last thing that we hear in the body is the sound, how the sonic work is something that we're going to be doing here at National Black Theater at the Kennedy Center. Each of these moments are really landing a very powerful plane that is saying that Juneteenth is a moment to land on for liberation, but liberation of all humans, not a particular type.
Yes, and we shouldn't be surprised by this, right? Those of us who allow ourselves to be used by our ancestors for this greater purpose of all of us getting closer to freedom and experiencing joy in the process, that's what allows us to be able to do this in synergy, right? And to link up, and so, or to link arms and aims, to use a phrase of Susan Taylor, one of our sisters in the movement. So I also want to just underscore what Emil said and name Miss Opal Lee, the godmother of Juneteenth, who fought for lots of reasons that we didn't discuss, to make that a center point. I also want to reclaim pride being something that wouldn't exist if it were not for Marsha Pay It No Mind Johnson, who very much stands in line with everything that we've been talking about and operates as a spirit guide for the work that we do. And we can extend what normally is white folks' pride and celebrate that.
And take it back.
Right? We don't reclaim it as we've been taught to do. This weekend in DC, celebrating, shout out Earl folks at the Center for Black Equity. Black folks starts, right? So in the same way that we often have to start with pieces of the pie or the calendar or the narration of the truth, we can continue to reclaim all of it and remind folks that all of this began in Africa, that us reclaiming African ways of being, including community, is how we're going to get through. And we should just celebrate that process and make sure that as many babies can participate as possible, as many of our elders can do so too, because we all deserve to taste joy while doing this work of getting closer to freedom.
I mean, what I also equally love is what you've consistently done throughout this conversation is that the gathering is not just the ones on the physical plane, but also the spiritual plane, and that we have to as many times as we possibly can name those ancestors who come with us when we say that 10,000, right? We say I walk in. Oh.
Yeah, if I could, I'll often say this, right? When sometimes I know Emil experiences members of our community who believe that like being queer is white people stuff, right? Like to be gay is to be white, or that some of us are trying to be, again, gay because we believe their proximity to whiteness is going to save us in some way. And so I quote Sambufu Some, who wrote The Spirit of Intimacy. Chapter 13 of the book is titled Homosexuality, the Gatekeepers. And what they write is, in my village in West Africa, the words lesbian and gay did not exist, but the word gatekeeper did. And gatekeepers hold the space between the physical community and our ancestors. It's the same concept that our Native siblings hold when they talk about two-spirited people. What we need to do is, again, remind folks, let's all engage in white supremacy rehab. Let's remember that like that didn't just skip us. Everything started in Africa. And so that has to be a part of us too. And I'm saying this again because it is exactly this. Community for us is being connected to everyone who has sacrificed so that we could have this conversation right now. So that we can use in the ways that we're going to be used, such that babies who don't ask to be born, who don't consent often to the politics that are shaped and framed, including in spaces like DC, can experience life without the trauma that some of us have endured.
Yeah, Ashe.
Emil, do you have anything you want to add as we get to the place of wrapping up? Yes.
I want to lift up, as we're naming names, James Baldwin, who the Native Son movement is named after, from Notes of a Native Son, and that this is also the year of his 100th year of his birth, right? And so I think it's very important to lift him up. And as David was speaking, and I've been so moved by actually both of your comments today, and being in community and gathering with you. But you know, Mr. Baldwin said, "The place in which I will exist will not. I mean, the place in which I will exist will not exist until I create it." Right, and I think that is what we're doing, right? We're recreating these spaces that feel safe, that feel healing, that feel soulful, that also are about resistance, right? This is a time we're living in super challenging times, and this horrible election year, and we have to be pouring into each other and lifting each other up and holding each other.
Ashe. Well, we are at time. This is only supposed to be a glimpse into some deep wisdom from powerful individuals. I mean, the three of us, everyone should be following and be a part of the work, right? The work that Dr. David John is doing, the work that Emil is doing, the work that I'm doing, the work that is happening and present. June is, you should have your month already planned out, right? There is enough to do, and there's enough that will hit every aspect of your probably itinerary by making sure that you show up and show out for the spaces in which we are occupying. So please follow the work. Please follow where the work is coming. To start you off, you should be in DC to see the gathering, a collective sonic ring shout at the Kennedy Center, where the halls of the Opera House will radically be changed by a 90-minute sonic quest with works by Toshi Regan, Nona Hendricks, Joel Thompson, Abby Dobson, Troy Anthony, Carlos Sams, and Courtney Bryan. They will be done with an 80-person orchestra, 48-person choir. We are uplifting the legacy of our sound and how our sound can radically shift who we are and where we can be. So that's how you start potentially. Then you get to go over to see what Native Son is doing with Emil and really dive into the work of what Native Son is doing and allowing for the work that what Emil is navigating by going to that gala. And then you get to round it out by coming back to DC now. DC is, it's where it's going to be at. And following the work that Dr. David John is doing to make sure that the radical space for human life, we're not even going to just say just queer life, human life, and all the facets of where it needs to be. It is radically be given a voice, given access, and invested in properly. So these are three dynamic ways to make sure your June is living in the spirit of Juneteenth, living in the spirit of our ancestors. And I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for this moment. It was 20 minutes of dynamic talking, and I'm deeply filled by it and moved by it, and say Ashe with deep gratitude.
Ashe and amen.
Ashe and amen. Thank you.